All right, hey everybody. Today's video is going to be about the legendary pirate Davy Jones. But before that, I just wanted to bring one thing up. You ever reread One Piece and then just stumble upon a particular line of dialogue or a particular panel that just makes you go like, for something that's happening way later in the story? I had a moment like that today. I was rereading Alabasta at the beginning when Luffy and Usopp were fishing, and then they, accidentally snag Mr. Two off of his ship, and then, it's a fun times had by all. Mr. Two displays his devil fruit ability and everything like that. Well, before Mr. Two gets fished up by Luffy and Usopp, and Karu, I suppose, they were using Karu as bait, there's a line of dialogue because they're sailing into this hot spot in the ocean that was covered with like steam from a volcano under the water, and Nami was sort of explaining this, and she was like, yeah, in a few thousand years, tens of thousands of years, this area is going to give birth to a new island because of the volcanic activity. To which you then have Luffy and Usopp just kind of musing as they're fishing with Karu as bait on the end of their fishing poles. In some tens of thousands of years, huh? Wonder if I'll be alive then. And then Usopp says, not a chance. That is, if you're human. So funny. Now, it's obviously a joke because Luffy's not going to live 10,000 years. And Usopp is like, yeah, the only way you could live 10,000 years is if you weren't human or something like that. So funny. So silly. I wonder if that's not going to come back at some point. So, yeah, I mean, Emu, the sun god themselves, who knows? I'm not sure. I just wanted to bring that up because it was one of those moments where it's like, was it just put in there as just a gag, or did Oda know about Emu all the way back then, and did he have everything planned out? Yeah, I have no idea. So anyway, today we're going to be talking about Davy Jones, all right? Now, granted, we don't know a lot about this character. Davy was originally mentioned way back during the Davy Backfight arc, during Long Ring Longland, because that is the namesake of the Davy Back, all right? And Robin sort of goes into a little bit of detail as they're setting everything up. The one thing I do love about that arc, I mean, I love, like, the layout of the Davy Back and everything like that, the donut race, the groggy ring. I thought that was all cool. It just... Foxy's crew sucks, whatever. But as they were setting up that little county fair, and selling cotton candy and those like chocolates to everybody, it was like, popcorn, get your popcorn here. Like they were doing all that stuff. Chopper walks over to Robin and is like, hey, who was this Davy Jones anyway? And Robin gives like two pieces of explanation in this chapter. At the beginning of the chapter, she explains the Davy Backfight originated on a place called Pirate Island, or Pirate Paradise. Later on, this would be Hachinosu, okay? So we know about that. But then she also explains the namesake of the Davy Back, that Davy Jones was even further back, was like in the realms of legend, was a pirate that lives on the ocean floor, and everything that falls down into his realm he takes, and he doesn't give it back. So this is what Davy Back is, So Davy Jones did not create the Davy Back fight, at least... maybe he would have, who knows, all right? But the idea is that in honor of his memory, or his legend, as it were, the Davy Back started on Hachinosu. We have now gotten some new information involving Rocksteady Zebek, where he utilized the Davy Back in order to gather his really strong motley crew of pirates, like Whitebeard, and Stussy, and Wang Zhi, and Gonzui, and Don Marlin, and Shiki, and Captain John, and Silver Axe, and this random fishman guy, like, he ended up getting a lot of really heavy hitters on his crew because of the Davy Back. Does that mean Rocksteady Zebek created the Davy Back? Probably not, because we also learned that pirates had been settling on Hachinosu before rocks sort of, started getting involved and taking over. Hachinosu was originally a penal colony where a lot of criminals were sent to die in the barren wasteland. Then they discovered a large amount of resources like gold and silver and all sorts of like deposits under the island. And then they started to ally with the underworld organizations, and that's how the pirate island kind of grew and flourished. it was much later that Rox got involved and was like planning this big money-making scheme, like double-crossing the world government, going to Hachinosu, taking it over with his crew so he can become the boss of the island, right? But exactly when Hachinosu was set up as the penal colony, exactly when those resource deposits were discovered, exactly when it was flourishing as the pirate paradise, we don't know when that was exactly, but we can assume that it was during that period when the pirates were flourishing with all that gold that they have discovered. That was the moment the Davy back fight was created, all right? And the legend of Davy Jones stretches back, you know, well, maybe even before the Void Century, okay? So that's kind of the idea of the setup of the Davy back fight, and a little bit of explanation on Davy Jones himself, all right? So in the most recent chapter, when Rox was confronting Emu, and I just did a video about this because that's a very impactful scene, the narrator sort of comes on and says Rox D. Zebek was a fan of Davy Jones. In one translation, it even says he was a Davy Jonesian, which makes it sound like a religion almost, which you have Wang, who's probably the pirate cult leader. Maybe that was Wang's cult. You know, Wang decided, like, instead of worshiping Wang, he's like, worship Davy Jones. I am Wang, his high priest, or some shit like that. I don't know, right? Anyway, he was a fan of Davy Jones, and Rox was, you know, a fan of the Davy back because of that and all that sort of stuff. Foxy was as well, and that's how Foxy built his crew up and everything. Okay, so far, we know 3 things about Davy Jones, pretty adamantly, I would say, all right? Number 1, he was a pirate. That one I think was pretty much, we know about that one, okay? Number 2, he lives on the ocean floor. That was said as much by Robin. And number 3, Davy Jones works out a lot. These are his socks. Had to fit the SpongeBob SquarePants reference in there somewhere. We're actually going to come back to SpongeBob here in a moment, okay? So those are the things we got about Davy Jones, all right? But here's the thing, though. We got a couple of characters that are talked about in the lore of One Piece that may in fact be the same character. So first of all, we have Joyboy. Joyboy was mentioned by Dr. Vegapunk to be the first pirate that was born in the Ancient Kingdom during the Void Century. He was the one that waged war against the Allied forces, or maybe the Allied forces initiated the war with him. Not really sure exactly how that story went. The Ancient Kingdom was a technologically advanced kingdom where the ancient weapons Pluton, Poseidon, and Uranus were created, or at least they had at the time. The Allied forces were the progenitor of the world government that decided to get together a bunch of kingdoms allied together to go fight against the Ancient Kingdom, and we still do not know much about the story there. Although Vegapunk does make it very clear, do not decide on just these are the good guys, these are the bad guys right out of the gate. You know, the Ancient Kingdom was definitely on the side of good, and then the Allied forces that would become the world government was definitely on the side of evil, or something like that. It wasn't as simple as that. I don't think Oda's going to make it like, Joyboy was a good and noble pirate, and the Ancient Kingdom just wanted to help the world with their ancient weapons. And then the evil world government attacked. Dawn, 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 dawn. And they stole the ancient weapons, and that's where we're at right now in the story. I don't think it's going to be that simple, okay? But Joyboy was mentioned to be the first pirate. Then we have Davy Jones, who was also sort of like a progenitor figure of the pirates, you know? It was like, oh, yeah, he was a guy way back in the day. He's like a legend, and he lives on the ocean floor, and he claims everything himself, and the Davy back fight, which was all centered around pirate crews and stealing the Jolly Rogers and the members of each crew. That's also connected to the history of piracy in the One Piece world, okay? Yeah. And then we also have a third character, the original Vander Decken. Yeah, Vander Decken's like great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, all right? So Vander Decken, the original, was mentioned to be the captain of the Flying Dutchman. the ghost ship that we see at the beginning of Fishman Island when the Straw Hats are heading down into, like, you know, the abyssal pelagic zone, like the super deepest, or the hadopelagic zone, whatever, the deepest part of the ocean where everything's so dark. All of a sudden, this creepy ghost ship emerges out of the fog of the underwater sea. And then, you know, that's Vander Decken and also Watatsume, and everybody was, like, on that ship. And that ship looked very, very old. About 800 or 900 years old, give or take, okay? I bring this up because historically, as in the legends in our world, because the Flying Dutchman is directly based off of a legend that existed back during, like, the 16th and 1700s, during when, like, the Dutch East India Trading Company and piracy was very active in our world. All that stuff was going on right around the time when the Age of Exploration was happening, and there were people sailing all over the world. Obvious legends about, like, ghost ships began to pop up all over the place because everyone was traveling all over the place. There was a legendary ship called the Flying Dutchman that could never make port and could never, you know, be stopped. It would just sail the seas for eternity. And sailors for hundreds of years, even to this day, still purport to see the Flying Dutchman and some ghostly green signal or lantern light off into the distance. That's the Flying Dutchman, trying to make the port that it can never reach. Kind of a creepy ghost story, if nothing else, right? Okay. And so there was a lot of art and a lot of things referenced in our media about the Flying Dutchman. The Flying Dutchman is a character in SpongeBob. Who dares backsass the Flying Dutchman? So, also, and I'm going off my memory on these movies because I've only ever seen the first one, and it was a very long time ago. But in the Caribbean movies, in the first one, Curse of the Black Pearl, Flying Dutchman is the ship of Davy Jones. It's kind of mixed up a little bit in One Piece, right? So you have Davy Jones, who was a character, purportedly, that did exist back during that time period, that lives on the ocean floor. The Flying Dutchman is a ghost ship that was found on the ocean floor. But the captain of the Flying Dutchman is Vander Decken. Right now, it's like Vander Decken the Ninth, but it was mentioned the original captain was Vander Decken the First, not Davy Jones. And then you have Joyboy, who was also mentioned to be the first pirate. So in the last video, I was going over this, and I was like, well, wait a minute. We could probably consolidate some of these characters together. You know what I mean? So, like, I don't know about Vander Decken the First, but you could very easily fit Joyboy and Davy Jones into the same character, right? Because Joyboy is like a title or the name of a sun god that maybe Joyboy received later in life. I don't think that was the name he was born with. Davy Jones, on the other hand, that just sounds like a name. I mean, there's people named David Jones. Like, Jones is one of the most, like, common last names ever. Like, there's probably a lot of people walking around on the planet right now named David Jones. All right, okay? So that makes more sense as a name. And also, many people have brought this up. If that is the case, we have David Jones, Davy Jones, Will of D, Joyboy, the formed together the clan of D, I guess, on the Ancient Kingdom to fight against the world government. Is the Will of D just the Will of Davy? I will go back, because I've talked about the Will of D a lot before, obviously, right? And I've always said that, like, if it turns out that the Will of D is just, like, a single word, like the will of a demon, or the will of the devil, or the will of the dawn, because, like, the dawn of the new day and all that mentioned by, like, the minks and stuff like that. If it is, like, just the will of Davy, it would be sort of like, in one part, it would be like, oh, okay, that's it. That's all it was this whole time, just the will of Davy Jones. All right, I guess. But also, there's, like, more to it than that. It isn't just, like, you know it as the Will of Davy. That doesn't tell you anything unless you know specifically about the story of Davy Jones in One Piece. Not just, like, not David Jones from, you know, Pirates of the Caribbean or the folklore in our world. Oda takes a lot of that, usually as a jumping off point, and then will restructure it in his own story to meet his own needs, and he'll take his own artistic licenses and stuff like that, right? So the story of Davy Jones in One Piece probably isn't going to be the same Davy Jones like that was cursed in Pirates of the Caribbean, although there might still be a curse and stuff involved, right? But if he was Joyboy, right, like if Joyboy's original name was Davy Jones, and then you have a perfect, you know, like one-to-one there. He's like, okay, Joyboy was the first pirate, Davy Jones, that same character was the first pirate, okay? He also had the devil fruit, Hito Hito no Mi model sun god Nika, and then had that power, and then rallied the ancient kingdom together, and then fought against the allied forces who would eventually become the world government. The ancient weapons were also in play during the time, okay? Since, as a side tangent here, considering we now know about the Harley, and that there was a first age and a second age and a third age that we're in right now, and the Void Century most likely took place in like a transitionary period between the second and third age, were the ancient weapons ancient during the Void Century? Because I think it was mentioned that they were created in the Ancient Kingdom, but that Ancient Kingdom, by the time that we get to the Void Century, might have also have been ancient. Right? It's sort of like with like Egyptian history, with like by the time Cleopatra's around, you know, the pyramids are already like well over 2,000 years old at that point, right? So by the time the Void Century happens, you know, 800 to 900 years ago during that blank century, the Ancient Kingdom could have been the last bastion, the last remnant of the first age that was like 3,000 years ago, which would have been maybe the same time that the facility was built on Elbaf, right? So like first age, there was like contemporary science, and there were giant cities and nuclear reactors and all these like crazy technology, weapons and all that stuff. Maybe they had androids and iPhones. Maybe they had actual androids walking around. I don't know. And then stuff happened, and then it was like a cataclysm, and then cut to thousands of years later, it is now the Void Century, and the Ancient Kingdom is all that is left of that, but they still have Pluton, Poseidon, and Uranus, although we know Poseidon is a mermaid princess, not a, like, weapon, like an object. Not sure if they're all like that, or if, you know, Poseidon is the one exemption there. Not really sure exactly how that works, or if maybe Poseidon was an actual weapon at some point, but the power of Poseidon got transferred to a mermaid princess, and it was passed down through the lineage that way. I'm not sure how all this works, right? But yeah, that was Joyboy. Joyboy was the person at like that led the battle there, and you know, we see the flashback with Emmett and everything. Okay, so there was advanced technology at that point, right? Okay, so then he dies, Joyboy does, but maybe he didn't die. Maybe he was cursed, and part of that curse was like dragged down into the ocean floor, because as we all know, the main weakness of devil fruits is water. So, like, what better prison to be, you know, put in than, like under the ocean, right? You are crushed under the ocean's power. Davy Jones and Joyboy, the same character, are sealed away at the bottom of the briny deep. I used to think that Emu was like Mother Ocean, like she was Mother Nature this whole time, like that was going to be the twist. I'm not really sure about that right now, because it was mentioned Mother Nature hates devil fruit abilities, and from what we see, Emu employs a lot of people that have devil fruit powers, doesn't seem to really particularly care about devil fruit abilities, never mentions anything about devil fruit abilities. Emu really hates the poneglyphs, and because of Lily's blunder, or what she did on purpose, right? So Emu has a problem with the pirates and has a problem with the poneglyphs and stuff and those things existing. Also has a major fear of Joyboy. You know, when we saw Emmett's hockey nuke go off, Joyboy's hockey, you know, Emu was like trembling in fear, but never really brought up like devil fruit powers, or like, I despise the devil fruits. I wish they could never exist. They're a sin against nature, or anything. We've never seen Emu talk about devil fruits like that, so maybe Emu is not Mother Ocean, right? But maybe the actual Mother Ocean got pissed off at Davy and was just like, you will be cursed, and then like dragged him down. Maybe the reason why devil fruit weaknesses, like the sun god fruit, could have been the first devil fruit. It could have been the first power that was granted to Joyboy, and then Mother Ocean laid a curse on Davy Jones, on Joyboy, that all devil fruit users from here on out will not be able to swim, will be dragged down just like Davy was dragged down. So if they ever go down there and they save Davy, maybe Davy's like all sealed up, maybe he's a mummy, maybe he's still alive, I don't know, he's just immobile or in like a state of like suspended animation or something like that. They drag him back up to the surface, and then the curse is lifted and all devil fruit users can swim in the water again. But they get to keep the power, or maybe the powers go away. Maybe the only reason the devil fruits work is because of that curse. You know, it's like, oh, the ability to desire whatever ability you want and to live in different realities, as Vegapunk spoke about it, right? That power only works Because, like, if we're just breaking it down from the fundamental reasoning, there's a dude that's chained at the bottom of the ocean or sealed in, like, under the water or something like that. And if you break that seal, then the curse is lifted, but devil fruit abilities also stop working, and then they all lose their powers. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here at this point, but I just wanted to throw it out there because, yeah, we have all these characters and stuff. You know, Davy Jones is now relevant again. He's being brought up, so there's going to be reference to him in the flashback. Now, what about Vander Decken and the Flying Dutchman, like, ship that we see at Fishman Island? What's up with that? Well, it could just be as simple as Oda changing around the myth, you know? Like, so a lot of the myth exists in our world, like in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. Davy Jones is the captain of the Flying Dutchman. In the One Piece lore, Davy Jones is not the captain of the Flying Dutchman, right? Oda does this with names all the time. He'll take names of stuff that are related to a myth, but he'll throw it somewhere else. Like, so for example, with the Noah, the Ark, the name of the person that built the Ark in the Bible was Noah. Oda spun that around and, like, no, the name of the Ark itself is Noah. So it could just be something like that. He's like, yeah, the ship is named the Flying Dutchman, but it's captained by Vander Decken. And Vander Decken is not Davy Jones. I don't think, well, I mean, maybe it could. Could all three of these characters be the same character? Could Joyboy, Davy Jones, and Vander Decken the First all be the same? Vander Decken is a fishman. All right, which stands to reason that the original would be a fishman as well. Although, from what we learn, and we learn this throughout Fishman Island, it's like the way that genetics works in this world, fishmen and merfolk can definitely, mingle, and they can make other... You know, there's something that's very obvious in the story when you look at it, especially in the scene where Luffy and Jinbei are having the blood transfusion together, okay? The fact that humans and fishmen can exchange the same blood, which I would also think extends to humans and merfolk, humans and giants can exchange the same blood. We're learning about all these hybrid races now through Skopper Gabon, like the Dosundadas and the Zushindados and the mushroom people and all that kind of stuff like that, the Tontadas and everything like that. It is very clear that maybe at one point they were all one, it was all one population that split off into different, like, so fishmen, merfolk, giants, tontadas, you know, minks over here, because they can mingle and they can have children together. So I don't know, like, we know there's at least 2 apocalypsi in the One Piece world, right? So if this is some situation where, like, they were all humans at one point, or maybe they might have all been fishmen at one point, or they might have all been giants at one point, because, like, all ancient giants at one point, and then something happens, apocalypse, mutation or whatever, I don't know, and then it all splits off into different groups, but they're all still able to have kids together. And they all have the same blood, like the same blood types and shit. It's just that this one guy would have multiple names. He'd be like born Davy Jones, but took up the title Joyboy later because of the devil fruit he had, but also would be named Vander Decken. And the story with Vander Decken, we know a little bit about Vander Decken the First. He was apparently a captain that went mad and, like, started murdering his own crew, and that's why his ship was cursed to the bottom of the ocean. That's kind of the idea with Vander Decken. We don't know if that's true or not, though. That could just be, like, a myth that was, you know, spread and everything like that. But Vander Decken the First and the Flying Dutchman and Davy Jones' story seems very similar. So maybe Joyboy and Davy Jones aren't the same character. Maybe Vander Decken and Davy Jones are the same character. That would make more sense. But then also, Joyboy was the first pirate. If all these characters turn out to be the same character, clever, Oda. Very clever, Oda. We'll see what happens, I guess. I'm getting kind of confused here myself, so I'm just going to stop here. But thanks for watching the video, everybody. And let me know down below what you think of all this. You know, who was Davy Jones? Who was Joyboy? Who was Vander Decken the First? What's up with the Flying Dutchman? Where did devil fruits come from? Who's Mother Ocean? Who is Emu? How long ago was the primordial realm? Not the primordial realm. I always mix that up. The primordial realm is like the lowest level of Elbaf, and the first realm, that's what I meant. The first realm is the realm in the Harley. How long ago was that? I don't know, man. I don't know. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. TechEgg signing out. Davy Jones.